You guys really went deep on this one, huh? The disappearance of Lisa Spence.
Yeah, from Miramar, Florida.
Back in 2009,
In
we've got interview excerpts.
police reports.
Oh, we even got some audio clips for this deep dive.
Yeah, should be an interesting one.
So let's start with what we know about Lisa.
Okay.
Originally from Trinidad and Tobago,
Right.
moved to Florida, seemed like she was working really hard to build a life, for herself and her teenage daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day in October, she vanishes.
Yeah, and it's her sister-in-law,
Oh, wow.
all the way up in Philadelphia, who first raises the alarm.
Right.
After days of no contact, which, that distance just adds another layer of complexity to this whole investigation.
Exactly, because by the time Miramar PD even goes to do a welfare check at her apartment,
Mm-hmm.
who knows how much time has already been lost.
Right.
And that's where they first meet her boyfriend, Paul Edwards.
And that initial encounter, with someone close to a missing person, it's so crucial.
Oh, absolutely.
It can really set the tone, raise those first red flags. And in this case, what Paul tells police immediately stirs up some serious questions.
Like what?
Well, he claims that Lisa just up and left him, taking all of her belongings.
Wait, in the space of like an hour?
Yeah, within an hour, he says.
That seems pretty unlikely considering, she didn't have a car.
Yeah, logistically challenging, to say the least.
Yeah.
You've got to consider the volume of her belongings, the lack of transportation.
Right.
It really makes you question, the plausibility of that scenario right from the get-go.
Totally. And you can even kind of hear that skepticism in the officer's voice in this clip from that first encounter.
Oh, let's hear it.
You're saying she took everything? Clothes, shoes, everything. And she just walked out with it all.
Wow.
So while they're talking to Paul outside, they spot what looks like a blood smear on the door jamb.
Oh,
Obviously, that changes everything.
absolutely. The possibility of violence instantly elevates the case.
Right.
They call in the homicide unit, which just shows how seriously they're taking this potential blood evidence.
Yeah, but then
Plot twist.
the lab results come back, and it's not human blood.
This highlights a critical point about these investigations.
Okay.
Not all blood is created equal.
I never thought about that.
Animal blood, for instance, can sometimes react similarly to human blood in those preliminary tests.
Oh, really?
So investigators have to be incredibly meticulous to avoid jumping to conclusions.
Wow, that's a good point.
Right.
So while they're trying to figure out this whole blood situation,
Mm-hmm.
Paul's story starts to change.
Oh.
First, he says Lisa left amicably.
Oh.
But then he tells police she actually attacked him with a knife,
What?
which would explain the cuts on his hands.
No, why didn't he mention this attack to the officers who initially responded? That delayed disclosure is a big red flag.
Exactly. If someone attacked me with a knife, I'd be on the phone with 911 immediately.
Right.
Unless, of course, you had something to hide.
It makes you wonder if this whole story about the attack was just a way to explain away those cuts.
Oh, I see.
Once you realize that the police were suspicious.
Yeah. And while all this is going on, Lisa's brother, Dexter, starts getting text messages, seemingly from Lisa, saying she moved to Jacksonville and everything's fine.
Yeah.
But Dexter is immediately suspicious.
Interesting, because families often have that sixth sense about their loved ones.
Oh, totally.
They know their communication patterns, their habits, their little quirks.
Right.
And it's fascinating how even something as simple as the frequency of text messages can raise a red flag for someone who knows them well.
I can see that. So now the police have these conflicting accounts from Paul.
Mm-hmm.
They have the suspicious blood and then the family's gut feeling that something's wrong.
Yeah. What do they do next?
What do they do?
Well, they start digging into the digital trail.
Okay.
They obtain warrants for Lisa and Paul's phone records, and that's when things get really interesting.
What do they find?
Despite Paul's claims that Lisa left him, their phone records show their phones were pinging off the same cell towers constantly
What?
in the days leading up to her disappearance.
So they were together.
It seems that way. This directly contradicts his version of events.
Busted by the cell phone records?
Yeah.
And as if that wasn't enough, they also discover Paul was driving a rental car the week Lisa vanished.
That rental car becomes a key piece of the puzzle.
Oh.
Investigators locate the car,
Yeah.
and through some very meticulous forensic work, they discover a tiny drop of blood inside.
Really? It's crazy how such a small detail can crack a case wide open.
Absolutely. It's like finding a needle in a haystack.
Yeah,
But in forensic investigations, those needles can tell the entire story.
that's true. So armed with this new information,
Mm-hmm.
police get a warrant to search Paul's apartment.
Oh, okay.
While it's not a gruesome scene, they do find blood spatter under the bathroom vanity.
And that's where bloodstain pattern analysis comes in.
Oh, okay.
You see the way blood splatters, the shape of the stains, the direction it travels.
Yeah.
All of that can reveal a lot about what happened in that room.
So what does the blood spatter under the vanity tell us in this case?
Well, it could indicate a struggle, an attempt to clean up, or even the position of both Lisa and Paul during a potential altercation.
So it could be a lot of things.
It's a piece of silent evidence that speaks volumes.
I like that.
Yeah.
While they're analyzing that blood evidence,
Right.
they're still trying to get a straight answer about those cuts on Paul's hands.
Mm-hmm.
And they interview a coworker of his who reveals a very different story
Oh, really?
than the knife attack Paul told the police.
Okay, this is where we get the infamous chicken alibi.
The chicken alibi.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that. What happened?
Paul apparently told this coworker that he cut himself while preparing chicken.
While preparing chicken.
Yeah.
Why would you lie about that?
Why he felt the need to invent this elaborate story is anyone's guess.
Right.
But these inconsistencies, these lies, often end up tripping suspects up.
So we've got a missing woman.
Yeah.
A boyfriend with like constantly changing stories.
Mm-hmm.
We got suspicious blood evidence.
Right.
And a family that's just totally convinced something terrible has happened.
Yeah. What do the police do with all of this?
What do they do?
They realize they're dealing with a potentially very clever and dangerous individual.
Yeah.
With no body and limited direct evidence, they need to get creative.
Mm-hmm.
They decide to take a big risk, a gamble that could either make or break the case.
Okay, this is where things get really interesting.
Indeed. The police, working closely with the prosecutor, hatch this plan to clone Lisa's phone.
Clone her phone?
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
Essentially, they create a virtual copy of her phone.
Oh, wow.
Replicating her number and her account details.
Okay.
This allows them to send text messages that would appear to be coming from Lisa herself.
That's pretty high tech, but what's the point of sending these fake texts?
They're hoping to provoke a reaction from Paul.
Oh.
Maybe a phone call, a text back, or even some kind of panicked action.
Right.
Anything that might reveal information about Lisa's whereabouts or his involvement in her disappearance.
So they set up this whole elaborate plan.
Yeah.
Involving surveillance teams, planes, undercover cars. It was all riding on this one text message.
The pressure must have been immense.
Yeah.
It was a high-stakes operation with no guarantee of success.
So what was the message?
What did they send to Paul?
Yeah.
5 words that were both vague and chilling. Just wait till I got better.
Oh, wow. What was the thinking behind that phrase?
It was designed to tap into Paul's potential guilt and fear.
I see.
It hinted at Lisa being alive,
Right.
possibly injured, and, potentially seeking revenge in the future.
Wow.
It was a gamble, a psychological ploy to see how he would react.
So then they waited.
And waited.
Paul didn't respond immediately.
Right.
Which must have been agonizing for those surveillance teams.
Hours ticked by and the tension must have been palpable.
Yeah.
Every passing minute increased the possibility that the plan had failed, that they'd lost their chance.
But then finally there's movement.
Yes.
After 3 long hours, Paul leaves his mother's house and gets into his car.
Oh.
And he starts driving erratically.
Oh.
Seemingly aware that he's being followed.
This suggests he might have been growing paranoid. Maybe even suspecting that the text message wasn't really from Lisa.
So the chase is on. The surveillance team is on his tail. But where will it lead? Will this risky plan pay off? And what will they find at the end of this pursuit? We'll delve into those answers in part 2 of this deep dive. So last time we left off with Paul, leading this whole surveillance operation on like a wild goose chase.
Yeah, after that cryptic text message.
Planes in the air, unmarked cars on the ground. It almost sounds like a movie.
It does.
So where did this high-speed pursuit actually end up?
Well, after a tense game of cat and mouse, through the city, Paul veers off the main roads and heads toward this remote area near the edge of the Everglades.
The Everglades?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a pretty stark contrast to like that busy shopping center he was at earlier.
It is.
Sounds like this is about to take a much darker turn.
It's a desolate area.
Yeah.
Dense vegetation, swampy terrain. Not the kind of place you'd typically find someone just, running errands.
Right. And once they reach this location, the surveillance team establishes a perimeter while a canine unit is brought in to search.
Dogs can be incredible assets in these kinds of searches.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially with such a large and unforgiving environment.
Right. So the tension is building. The dogs are on the scent.
Mm-hmm.
What do they find?
This is where the case takes a truly heartbreaking turn.
Okay.
After an extensive search, the canine unit alerts on a shallow grave.
Oh, no.
And inside, they discover the remains of Lisa Spence.
It's a devastating discovery,
It is.
confirming everyone's worst fears,
Yeah.
weeks of searching, hoping for the best, and this is how it ends.
It's a tragic reminder of the very real human cost of these cases.
Yeah.
The shattered lives left behind.
It's a tough reality to confront.
It underscores the importance of understanding the complexities of domestic violence.
Okay, so they found Lisa, which obviously points to Paul, right? But do they have enough to actually charge him with murder?
Remember, suspicion alone isn't enough to secure a conviction.
Right.
They need to prove how Lisa died, when she died.
And conclusively link Paul to the crime. The discovery of her body is a major breakthrough.
But it's just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
They need that irrefutable evidence,
Right.
that smoking gun, to connect all the dots.
So the forensic team meticulously processes the crime scene.
Right, collecting any and all potential evidence.
Of course, the medical examiner performs an autopsy on Lisa's remains.
Right.
So what did the autopsy reveal? Was it possible to determine the cause of death after all this time?
Given the condition of the remains, pinpointing the exact cause of death was a challenge.
Yeah.
But the medical examiner was able to definitively rule out natural causes.
Okay.
The conclusion, Lisa's death was a homicide.
So they have a homicide, they have a suspect.
Right.
But how do they bridge that gap?
How do they prove Paul's involvement beyond a reasonable doubt?
Exactly.
This is where those seemingly insignificant details we talked about earlier become so crucial.
Oh.
Remember those cuts on Paul's hands?
And all the conflicting stories he told about how he got them.
Yeah, the alleged knife attack,
Right.
the chicken alibi. It all felt so suspicious. Did any of that end up being relevant?
More than relevant.
Okay.
It turned out to be a key piece of the puzzle. DNA testing confirmed that the blood found in Paul's apartment in the rental car A&D at Lisa's burial site
Wow.
all belonged to Lisa.
So even though he tried to cover his tracks,
Right.
the evidence was literally written in blood.
It seems science has a way of catching up with even the most meticulous attempts at deception.
Absolutely. So with this mountain of evidence against him, Paul Edwards is finally arrested and charged with the murder of Lisa Spence.
It was a long and winding road to get to this point.
Yeah.
But the investigators' persistence and the power of forensic science ultimately led to justice being served.
But this case took kind of an unusual turn when it went to trial, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
What happened?
In a surprising move, Paul decides to represent himself in court.
Why would he do that? It seems incredibly risky for someone facing such serious charges.
It's a bold and often ill-advised strategy.
Yeah.
Some speculate he was trying to manipulate the jury,
Oh.
control the narrative, or maybe he genuinely believed he could outsmart the legal system.
It sounds like that controlling personality we've seen glimpses of throughout this whole investigation
Right.
might have finally taken over completely.
It's possible.
So how did this legal gamble play out for him? Did it work?
Not at all. Representing yourself in a murder trial is an incredibly complex undertaking.
Oh, yeah.
It requires a deep understanding of the law, courtroom procedures,
Yeah.
the rules of evidence,
Right.
not to mention the ability to remain calm and collected under immense pressure.
And from what we've learned about Paul, calm and collected doesn't exactly seem to be his strong suit.
You're right, the trial was a disaster for Paul.
Really?
He came across as erratic and unprepared.
Oh, no.
His arguments lacked coherence, and his attempts to cross-examine witnesses backfired spectacularly.
Oh, wow. So what was the verdict? Was the jury swayed by his, unconventional defense?
After a relatively short deliberation,
Yeah.
the jury found Paul Edwards guilty of second-degree murder.
Wow.
He was sentenced to life in prison.
Even though he went to such great lengths to cover up his crime, justice prevailed in the end. It's a testament to the dedication of the investigators and the unwavering pursuit of truth.
It's a powerful reminder that no matter how carefully a crime is concealed, the truth often has a way of emerging.
That's true. But this isn't quite the end of Lisa's story, is it?
You're right.
There was something about a confession years later.
Yes. Years after his conviction,
Okay.
Paul, now serving his life sentence, reaches out to Lisa's family.
Oh, wow.
He requests a meeting, expressing a desire to apologize and finally reveal what truly happened that night.
This is kind of a surprising twist. After years of denial and deception, what could have motivated this sudden change of heart?
It's a question that takes us into the complex realm of guilt, remorse, and the psychological burden of carrying such a heavy secret.
So we'll explore this unexpected turn of events and the impact it has on Lisa's family in the final part of our deep dive. We're back, and last time we learned that Paul Edwards, now serving a life sentence for Lisa Spence's murder,
Yeah.
had reached out to her family and wanted to, confess,
Right.
which is a really strange twist after years of silence and even, trying to represent himself in court.
It does.
So he gets to this meeting with Lisa's family, her mother, brother, and even her daughter, Serene,
Wow.
who was just a teenager when Lisa disappeared.
Yeah.
So what did Paul have to say after all these years?
Well, he finally admitted that his original story about Lisa leaving him was a complete fabrication.
Oh, wow.
He confessed that they'd gotten into this heated argument that night.
Okay.
Things escalated, and in a fit of rage, he struck Lisa.
So not a planned murder, but more like a crime of passion.
Yeah, that spiraled out of control. That's
Well-
what his confession suggests.
So he claimed that he never intended to kill her, that it was just like a spur-of-the-moment act fueled by anger and alcohol.
And then, overcome with panic, he tried to cover his tracks.
Right, the lies, the fake text messages, the staged scene.
All desperate attempts to escape the consequences.
His confession kind of painted this picture of a man consumed by guilt and fear. He described the nightmares he had, the constant worry of being caught,
Right.
the weight of carrying this secret for so long.
It's hard not to be cynical, though.
I know, right?
Why confess now, after all this time?
Yeah.
Is it truly remorse, or is it just a manipulation tactic, hoping for maybe a reduced sentence?
Yeah, it's a tough question to answer.
It is.
We can only speculate about his true motives, I guess. Maybe it was a combination of things. Maybe a desire for forgiveness,
Right.
a need to unburden himself, maybe even a genuine change of heart after years of reflection.
That's possible.
Regardless of his reasons, though,
Mm-hmm.
this confession had to have a profound impact on Lisa's family.
Of course.
They finally, heard the truth from the man who took her from them.
It was an incredibly emotional experience for them.
Oh, I bet.
He apologized to Lisa's family,
Oh,
expressing deep regret for the pain he'd caused. He talked about Lisa with this mix of affection and remorse,
Oh, wow.
describing her as a loving, hardworking woman who didn't deserve any of this.
Facing him, hearing him admit to his crime must have been so difficult for them.
It was, so family members found a sliver of peace in his confession,
Yeah.
a sense of closure in finally knowing what happened.
Right.
Others remained skeptical, though unable to forgive such a horrific act.
I can only imagine how complex their emotions must have been.
Exactly.
Betrayal, anger, grief, maybe even a flicker of relief at finally having some answers.
There's no right or wrong way to react in a situation like that.
No, of course not.
It's a deeply personal journey of processing trauma and loss.
So Paul confesses, he apologizes. But did it change anything legally?
Right. He was already serving a life sentence, so his confession didn't alter his legal standing.
Yeah, you remain in prison.
But while it didn't change the legal outcome, it did offer a degree of emotional resolution for Lisa's family.
They were able to fill in those missing pieces of the story to understand what truly happened that night, and maybe begin to heal from this horrific tragedy.
Lisa Spence's case is a powerful reminder of the dark side of human nature, the devastating consequences of domestic violence. It's a story of lost betrayal and a long and winding path to justice.
And for you, our listener, if anything in Lisa's story has resonated with you, if you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, please remember that you're not alone. There are resources available. People who care and help is just a phone call away.
Don't hesitate to reach out. You deserve to be safe, to be heard, and to have your story matter.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the disappearance of Lisa Spence. It's a case that reminds us that even in the face of tragedy, the pursuit of truth and justice can bring a glimmer of hope and healing. Until next time, stay curious.